Hello, everybody. The delusion of centralized power is what I am thinking about this week. For most of my life, I've been very interested in leadership, and I guess in the art of getting things done. Leadership is, in many ways, the most important ingredient and aspect of all our lives. I mean, we are the CEOs of the life we want to have. Or, as a mentor of mine often said, Mats, if you're not the lead dog, you won't like the view. And we all know leaders when we see them. As a leader myself, in many businesses, I've studied all types, witnessed all forms, and I've had many opportunities to prototype different ideas and approaches to leadership myself. So while leadership is the most important ingredient when trying to reach a particular objective, it is also equally true that our ability to diagnose, assess, and select leaders for important tasks leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, look at politics for one. Or look at the average success rate when someone gets recruited for a leadership task. When I've studied that over time, I don't think we're not nearly at 50% batting average, and probably a lot lower. And I've written before about the different types of leadership challenges and the different aspects of talent, particularly as it relates to startups versus existing companies. Today, though, I want to double-click on the delusion of centralized power. And by that, I mean the deeply held belief that many people have that someone, not you, another leader, or perhaps even the divine, can issue edicts and simply tell the organization what to do. But anytime we push decisions about choices away from people, we end up pushing people away from choices. And it always ends badly. Hence, the delusionary aspect of centralized power. Growing up in Sweden, I was often confronted by many people to whom the centralization of power was always the answer to any problem. Markets, companies, profit motives, etc. could not be trusted with big problems. By centralizing solutions, you will ensure equity, equality, and fairness, they argued. Thankfully, in the past 50 years, we have witnessed the power of a different kind of power. Distributed power, the power of networks. The value of them grows exponentially with the number of connections in the network. The human progress we have seen as a result is nothing short of sensational. If you don't believe me, read the late Hans Rosling's book, Factfulness. It cannot be debated. The evidence is simply too compelling. But did this happen because or in spite of centralized power? Well, that's the question, isn't it? I am leaning more towards the latter. But of course, there were some important regulatory enablers, such as free trade agreements, as well as deregulation and demonopolization of industries. Obviously, there are limits to what people can or should make choices about. There are common goods that we all need to live in a thriving society, like defense, laws, infrastructure, air quality, etc. However, the rule of government is less about replacing choice and more about enabling better and more choices. Like in all systems, there is and should be a healthy tension between what is in the best interest of individuals versus the entire population. I saw this tension when growing up in the McDonald's system, from both sides as being a franchisee partner far away from headquarters, as well as being an executive at the center. Most people assume McDonald's is a centralized machine. How else could the Golden Arches have achieved the kind of global penetration they have? But McDonald's, like the internet, is not the product of centralization. On the contrary, they are the product of a centralized set of rules, like recipes and HTML, and then the network executes the rest. It's in this dance between tight and loose, between the center and the periphery, where the magic happens. The currency in these systems is a high level of trust, buoyed by a shared sense of belonging for both purpose and outcomes. It's powerful. I guess the same type of trust is also a vital tenet of our liberal democracies. And it's certainly a key aspect of perhaps the most important document ever written on the boundaries of government and governance, the American Constitution. Tocqueville, one of the founders of democracy as we know it, noted that, quote, a centralized administration is fit only to enervate, end of quote. What we need is radical decentralization. Nature is filled with powerful systems that prosper without any centralized control. Many business ecosystems work in similar fashion. Think about Amazon. Think about the Airbnb system, the Uber system, and the App Store. Yes, there are core rules set by a few, but then the marketplace spurs radical innovation based on those rules. And for the most part, it benefits all participants in that system. Yes, for sure, it's not perfect. There's always tension between the hub and the spokes around what the tax to the system should be. But in general, it's a healthy tension that tends to find equilibrium. Most organizations, and certainly politics, are hung up on the problem of control and cannot bring themselves to trust that complex systems can administer, optimize, and innovate without a central authority. Most ideas that have propelled McDonald's and the internet for sure came from the network itself, not from the mothership. The Big Mac, the Filet-O-Fish, and the McFlurry, to name a few, were invented by a franchisee eager to improve the business. No edicts, no asks, just happened. The same is of course true for the internet, where the connection itself spawned millions of ideas and platforms where ideation, exchange, and commerce could take place in new forms. I believe in the principles of subsidiarity more than I believe in centralized power. Centralization always ends up suffocating innovation, and the centralized powers ultimately will reduce the freedom of the people they claim to serve. We see it today in and around the world. Way too many people are living under authoritarian and brutal regimes. Ukraine is such a clear example of this fight, and why Ukraine winning is of critical importance for anyone believing in freedom. I understand and empathize deeply with anyone concerned about our future and who'd like to see the government do more. It's understandable that people don't trust the institutions that are currently serving us so poorly. But wishing and believing that a few people that you don't know far away from you will end up making great decisions for hundreds of millions of people is foolish. It has never worked in the past and will never work in the future. Identifying problems is not the same as identifying solutions. This has always been my own personal ideological frustration. I guess one can sloppily say that I lean left on problems and I lean right on solutions. Perhaps it's what makes me out of balance. Who knows? But there is good news. Most Americans I know are aligned on what they want more of and what they want out of their lives. However, there is a great separation on what we don't like. That's where polarization finds its fuel. And sadly, we devote almost all of our debates to our differences rather than our commonalities. My hope is that we could spend more time on the things we all want and then set proper rules for the market to deliver against them. Tax bads, not goods. Reward transitions to renewable energy, reductions in obesity, a more dynamic workforce, etc. Today we seem to be arguing about everything, when in reality, most Americans agree on most things. And while we are arguing, nothing gets done. Instead, arguments, divisions, and frustrations grow. We can do better than this. I had some fun and took a quick stab at what I think most Americans would agree on. You can click a link in this post and fill out your response. It will take 1 minute, I promise. I forced myself to 6 categories. If you think 1 or 2 are missing, please add them. But let's try to capture not more than 5 together. I'm sure we can demonstrate the idea behind this post, which is that there is more wisdom in crowds and we can do better when we work together. If I get sufficient responses, I promise I will report back. So please click the link and fill your response out. Power to the people. Have a great week.